I have with me Bill Lester, a veteran of the Grand Am Sports Car Series and the three NASCAR National Series. Bill, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure, Ryan.
Now, in recent days, a major story to hit auto racing was the arrest of NASCAR CEO and chairperson Brian France on charges of driving under the influence and possession of oxycodone. What is your opinion of this?
Well, I just think it's a sad situation for him. This is not the first time he's had a run-in with drugs and or alcohol. And I would hope that he would have addressed the issue first time around and not had this situation occur again. I really consider this to be a black eye for NASCAR. NASCAR has been definitely suffering in the recent past with regards to its footprint, with regards to the number of fans it has, the reach it has, tracking new fans, et cetera, and so on. And it really did not need this occurrence to take place. So, it did. It's unfortunate. The sport will obviously move on. It's an opportunity, I guess, for new leadership potentially to come in. I think that could probably potentially be a good thing, but time will tell. I just don't think that this situation that occurred with Brian needed to. It's really not the time. Sort of many things could have gone really wrong with the condition that he was driving in. He's very fortunate that it wasn't worse. It could have been more than just a DUI or driving under the influence, whatever it is, arrest. It could have been much more detrimental. So thank heavens for that. But, the sport will continue. This will not be its downfall, but it definitely didn't need this sort of attention.
Oh yeah, I agree that this certainly is for him a major issue that he needs to get resolved. Personally, I'd be surprised if he ever returns to at least being the CEO and or chairperson of NASCAR. Now he still might have some involvement that I wouldn't be surprised about. I mean, I guess it really depends on his replacement, Jim France, who I think is more than qualified to do it. I mean, if the powers that be determine that he's doing as good or a better job, they might just keep him. And I also think that it's kind of really come at a worse time from a media attention perspective for NASCAR. I mean, because Sunday you had a fairly popular driver get their first win, and then literally with not even 24 hours later, the person in charge of the sport is getting arrested, and of course that's where all the attention will be going for the time being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is truly, bad timing, a bad situation. I have the utmost of respect for Jim France. He has been very supportive of me and my Grand Am career, my sports car career. He really does love sports car racing, and it's great that he was able to merge Grand Am and IMSA together to be under one unified front. When I talked to Jim France last, it was kind of like I'm trying to scale things down, not ramp things up. But he was obviously called to come in and take over the helm, and he'll do a fine job with it. I don't think he will be the answer long term. I think, quite frankly, that Lisa France Kennedy will probably be in good position to maybe take the reins and move forward with it. She's already got a prominent position in ISC. And I think basically taking over NASCAR would be maybe just an extension. Her son moved from behind the wheel to more executive ranks or management ranks. He might even be in a point of being well groomed for the opportunity to move into a higher level to maybe even replace his mother in her position. So it will remain to be seen. It's just really too early to tell. It's just really cheap talk and idle speculation right now.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, Lisa Kennedy, I'm sure would be a good choice to lead the sport, or even somewhere really down the road. Her son Ben could even be somebody. I mean, like anything, we'll just wait and see.
Yeah. Brian has kind of indicated that he has a much fonder interest, it seems to me, in the NFL. And, he's made overtures to be a franchise owner of an NFL team. And, I'm not even sure, if his heart and soul is even in racing anymore. It was something obviously that he didn't bring from the ground up. It was, passed down to him. So under his watch, it's been somewhat tenuous. There's been growth, but there's been some setbacks. Obviously, this last thing that happened this past weekend is probably the biggest one.
Yeah, yeah, I know he was within the last year or so, he was somebody who was considered to be a potential owner for the Carolina Panthers.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, my next question is, what got you into racing, and do you still have any involvement in racing?
Well, what got me into it was just love of cars as a kid, and what really set the hook was my father took me to a race when I was just shy of 8 years old. He took me to a sports car road race at Laguna Seca in Monterey, where I was growing up in Northern California. And just to date myself, the series was Can-Am racing, which doesn't run anymore. But the McLarens, the Chaparrals, Bruce McLaren, Denny Hulme, Jim Hall, guys that I saw run around there. It was just mind blowing for me, and so that set the hook. And it's really when I got my driver's license at 16, it was the Fast and the Furious for me before it was a movie. I was doing all sorts of things that I don't condone. And somebody told me, before you kill yourself or somebody else, take it to a racetrack. And that was kind of really my springboard to getting involved in racing. Never did I think I would wind up in NASCAR, but I thought I'd be a sports car road racer or an open wheel racer. But, the aura and the call of NASCAR, the pull of NASCAR was so strong that as a driver, you want to be where the action is, and that was where NASCAR represented, and took advantage of an opportunity. With regard to where I am now in racing, my last professional race was in 2012, and ironically, my last real competition was in karting. I never karted as a kid. I wish I had that opportunity and that springboard when I was young, but that didn't happen for me. But my last real competition was Rotax racing, shifter kart racing, and I represented Team USA in the grand finals in Portimao, Portugal in 2012, and that was my last real competitive racing. So with regard to where I am in terms of it being involved in racing, I serve NASCAR's um, appeals council. I'm part of the panel. So if there is a appeal that's being, waged by a team that's been penalized by NASCAR because of an infraction, that team has the opportunity to come and state its case, see whether or not the panel agrees or disagrees with their position, and ultimately kind of determines whether to support NASCAR's, ruling and finding or whatever the case, or, maybe lessen it or possibly even dismiss it. So I still keep, a eye on what goes on in NASCAR. I'm a fan of NASCAR. I always have been, and probably always will be. But, at this point, my involvement is really just from the standpoint of the appeals panel.
Oh, right. Yeah, I got into racing when, like basically my father was into racing. Really, my family in general has been, and his parents were before him. The first race I went to was the 2003 IRL race at Homestead, and then the following year went to the Indianapolis 500 for the first time. Like basically somebody from my family has every year since 1974, and
Wow.
yeah, and I went there. Basically, I've been back every year since, and eventually I got into other forms of racing, like NASCAR, Formula One, MotoGP, and also recently I've been getting into to IMSA.
Mm-hmm. No, that's cool. I mean, the fact is, I'm a fan of motorsports. Period. I don't care if it's NASCAR, IndyCar, sports cars. I mean, I love even series outside, like the DTM, German Touring Car Championship. I love seeing those cars. I love seeing the Australian, Touring Car Championship. So I'm pretty wide and diversified. I'll even watch drifting on occasion. I'll watch drag racing on occasion. So I just love things that are, that go fast and, just require a lot of skill and command to really be on top of and to be successful at. It's really just trying to, cage something that doesn't want to be caged. When you have, a 900 horsepower cup car or, a 700 horsepower Indy car, whatever the case is, or, 10,000 horsepower dragster. I mean, it just requires a lot of skill and a lot of talent. And, the average fan may or may not even understand just how much is required to be at the top level. And, when people used to say, and some still do, that being a driver is not an athlete, nothing really chaps my hide more because there's no question that to be able to do that successfully, you're an athlete.
Oh yeah, I mean like, I mean you're going at speeds at close to or even over 200 miles per hour. Like say on an oval, a 500 mile race on an oval, you're turning like say the Indianapolis 500 just as an example, 2.5 mile track for 500 miles. You're gonna make 800 turns with at least 30 with around 32 other cars around you at speeds close to 230 miles per hour, and IndyCar also doesn't have power steering either, and so it's not something for the faint of heart, at least.
Right, and you got to remember there's no, timeouts and no bathroom breaks. So, there's no doubt that it's a lot of physical exertion for a long period of time. A lot of G forces, a lot of quick responses and reactions and that sort of thing. And people just don't understand. A lot of people may think that it's like a Sunday drive, and where's the radio, change the channel or the station. It's like, no, absolutely nothing. Your level of concentration and commitment and such is almost unparalleled. There's so many things coming at you at such a high rate of speed, and you have to be proactive. More so than you are reactive. I mean, you have to see things that are going to happen and they're going to come at you before they do. Because oftentimes, if you're reactive, it's too late. You're along for the ride.
Sure. And well, you were saying how a lot of people might think it's just like a standard drive. I mean, take stock car racing, NASCAR for example, as you know. I mean, the inside of those cars, I mean, they're nothing like the street equivalents. I mean, they're so stripped down on the inside, but also how hot they get. I mean, I know there have been races this year where they've shown the temperatures in the car and it's like been over 150 degrees.
Yeah, absolutely. People don't have that appreciation. You think there's air conditioning and all that kind of stuff. You're really cool and comfortable. I mean, when I was racing, I would lose maybe 7, 8 pounds, in a race. My fire suit, you could hang it up on a hanger, and it would just be dripping sweat. There'd be a pool at the bottom of it, at the bottom of the feet or the legs of the suit. And no, I mean, it took a long time to, rehydrate, to recover. It's very physically exerting, and people just don't have that appreciation because it's hard to describe it. You have to actually be in it. It's interesting that you hear it from the perspective of people that have done like Richard Petty driving experience or something like that have seen like a NASCAR stock car race, but didn't have any real appreciation for it until they were running along as a passenger, riding along as a passenger. And they're like, wow, I never thought it was like this. I never thought the car would stick. I never thought it was going to be so hot. I never thought it was going to be so claustrophobic. All the certain, adjectives that they use. But yeah, you can't get a real appreciation for it unless you've done it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Now, what do you consider to be your most proud moment in racing?
Oh, my most proud moment, without a doubt, was qualifying for my NASCAR Cup debut race at Atlanta Motor Speedway in 2006. That was a big moment for me. That was at the time when, 12, 13, 14 cars over the 43 that started the field at that time were showing up. Nowadays they start 40 cars. 40 cars is a full field, and, half the time, or a large number of the time, they're not even getting 40 cars. They're starting 37, 38 cars, whatever the case is. Hey, back when I made my debut in 2006, there's like 52, 53 cars showing up, and a bunch of them were going home. So it was imperative that you qualified for the race before you could race in the event. And so it was a very proud moment for me to, that Friday night at Atlanta Motor Speedway, with all, the obstacles and the doubts and the, just the sheer anxiety and all that was, that went into that evening on my shoulders, expectations. I did it, The practice didn't really go well that day in the afternoon on Friday. Didn't have a lot of confidence at that time based on the fact that, we were, I think, practicing around 36th, 37th on the speed charts. Nothing to give me the impression that, I was going to be safely in the field. And, qualified in 19th position during the actual qualification. And that was a very, very proud moment for myself, for my family, for those that supported me. It answered, unequivocally that I could do it. And I was doing it against guys with tons of experience, years and years of experience. And this was my, Cup debut, and I essentially knocked the ball out of the park, and I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that evening. never forget how happy I was. I'll never forget the fact that, my mother cried, because she was there. She cried when when I made it, and my wife pretty much the same way. And no, it was without a doubt a moment I'll never forget, and probably my most proud moment in racing.
Yeah, right. And of course, you did it during the time when there was the whole top 35 rule, which meant there was basically only 8 open positions, and you say there was say 52, 53 cars going, so you had 17, 18 cars going for these 8 spots, which, in my opinion, makes it even more impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, because nowadays you show up with a cup car, you're in. It wasn't that way back in the day. The sport has definitely changed.
Yeah, so far this year for the Cup Series, that is, I think there's only even been one race with one car that failed to qualify the July Daytona race. I believe Timothy Peters didn't make it, and that was the only one that I can think of.
Okay. Yeah, it's a whole different paradigm now. It's unfortunate, because some of these guys are just showing up, they're not starting and parking. I think NASCAR's kind of done away with that, but for the most part, they're not really there to necessarily run the whole race, because it's so lucrative just to even make the race. So it's just a different scenario. The whole way the rules are now with stage racing and everything else that's come into play has really just changed the sport. Some people that love it, and there are a lot of people that don't like it, and so the opinions are wide and varied. We've lost a lot of fans as a result of some of these rules. The fact that there was initially called the chase, now it's whatever they call. It's not the chase per se, but it's what playoffs. I can't even really keep the terminology straight myself. But yeah, it's really changed the way the sport is, and some will argue it's for the better, and a lot will argue that it's not.
Yeah, I think there are valid arguments on both sides, really. I mean, I think I think some of the changes that have come to the sport, in my opinion, are positives, but I think there's several that you could say have driven away some of the previous diehard fans, and the question is, how do you get them back or find people to replace them?
Yeah, that is the question. The fan base for NASCAR has really aged out, and there isn't a huge influx of kids and youth, millennials that are coming to take the place. And so NASCAR is working very hard on trying to solve that problem. And the stage racing obviously was one of the things that they implemented that they believed could help it, because it would make the racing more interesting throughout the whole 500, 400 miles, whatever the case is, instead of it being a case where back in the day, I guess, a lot of drivers cruise for the first 400 miles of the 500-mile race, and then they race the last 100 miles. Now there's stakes and such involved at every step of the way. And they're racing for those points before the final checkered flag falls. So it's made the racing a lot more exciting in that respect. But there are also those that say, I can't even follow it. I mean, what is this? It's a race. It's fabricated. It's not genuine, because a race should start with the green flag and end with the checker flag. What are these green checker flags and stuff like that? I've heard it every which way from Sunday, but at least NASCAR is trying to spice it up, because the old tried and proven seems to have been losing ground. But who's to say that what they've implemented now is the right answer? Definitely not me.
Yeah, I agree. Probably not me either. Now, who do you consider to be your best, and if you're willing to answer, worst teammate?
Best and worst teammate? Huh. In what discipline? We talking sports cars? We talking stock cars? I mean, I feel that I've been very fortunate to have a lot of good teammates, and I've learned a lot from them. I've never professed to be the best driver, and I've learned a lot from teammates that I've had. And when you're not learning, you're not getting better. And I firmly believe that every driver can get better, and it's just a matter of how much you accelerate that learning curve. I mean, one of the things that you may not know, and maybe a lot of people don't know, is that I was never formally trained as a race car driver. I never went through a formal racing school to learn how to sports car road race. Like, for example, I never went through Bondurant or Russell. or barber to learn how to proficiently road race. I learned basically through trial and error, through just doing it. And the school of hard knocks, I learned a lot of hard lessons because I wasn't formally trained. I had to teach myself. I was a person who studied the techniques and skills of others and tried to apply them, and sometimes exceeded those limits, and again didn't do things that I condone, but that's what I had to do to scratch my itch and to see what my limits are. So and with NASCAR racing, I didn't grow up on dirt like most the NASCAR drivers will say they did. I've never been on dirt in my life except to walk on it, never raced on it. And so never went through a stock car school or anything like that. I just adapted what I learned from sports cars to see what worked and what didn't work in a stock car. And some of my teammates that really helped me a lot there were heck, when I started out with Bobby Hamilton in the Dodge program, Robert Presley helped me a lot. Bobby Hamilton helped me a lot. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, so they helped me a lot. One of the things that I learned is, hey, a lot of the sports car techniques don't work in a stock car. So, for example, one of the sports car things you do is try to be one of the last of the late breakers, right? You go into the corner as deep as you can because most of the passing is done under braking into the corner. Well, in NASCAR, you beat guys off the corner. You're not trying to be the last of the late breakers. You're trying to maintain and keep that momentum into and through the corner and set somebody up so you're beating them off the corner, right? So one of the hardest things for me to really learn, and I don't really profess that I completely learned it because my sports car habits really were embedded in me, but they would say that, Bill, you're driving to, you see God, and then you're trying to stop, I mean, you can't do that. You got to basically get out of the power earlier, roll into the corner, get back on the power hard, and beat them off. And some of my crew chiefs that I worked with in NASCAR kept saying, the thing will never turn. This is not a, 1,800, 2,200 pound open wheel car or a 26, 2,800 pound sports car. This is a 34, 3,500 pound stock car, and they're not meant to turn on a dime. They won't stop on a dime. So, you keep on trying to fight against what these cars can do, and that's not going to reward you. So I've had a lot of great help and guidance along the way. I really never had a bad teammate per se. I've been fortunate that I've worked with really good people. But, having said that, I would say that without a doubt, the most skilled driver that I've worked with in NASCAR was Kyle Busch. He was phenomenal, and he is phenomenal. When he was my teammate with Billy Ballou in 2007, I'll never forget, we were at Michigan International Speedway, and, I'm going through turn 3, turn 4, whatever the case is, and I'm thinking I'm right on the edge or whatever the case is, and I remember that Kyle Busch was coming up on me, and he passed me, and he was sideways through the corner with smoke billowing off of the right rear at about 170 miles an hour, and I said, man, the guy is gifted, and he's got something that I'll probably never have, and this was back in 2007, and look at all the things that he's accomplished since. He is the truth. The guy is boatloads of talent. People hate him, or love to hate him because, he may not have the most welcoming, warming personality, but Kyle Busch is all about business. He's all about being successful. He knows everything there is about a stock car, which is something I didn't know. I know a lot more about sports cars and setup and what have you on a sports car than I ever professed to know in a stock car. I knew about independent rear suspensions in sports cars, and then you come to a stock car with a solid axle rear end, a Ford 9-inch, and you're like, what is this, right? So I can't say that I ever, knew how these cars were built, the chassis were built, and I really didn't understand them like I should have. And so somebody like a Kyle Busch knew them inside out. He knew everything that he needed to go faster, where I was kind of, feeling around in the dark and learning, what I could, but getting such a late start at it, you got to realize I started my career in NASCAR at 40 years of age, and I made my Cup debut at 45. I did something that will never happen again. You're not going to start your professional racing career at 40 unless you're completely filthy rich, which I wasn't. And you're not going to make it to the top level of NASCAR in the Cup Series at 45. I think I broke the mold. I don't think that'll ever happen again. But having said all that, Kyle, he started out at a very young age, just like his brother Kurt. And, that's why they're so good. They built the cars. They knew the cars. They've been doing it for a long time. They had boatload of experience. I'm coming in here racing at the top levels and such with no experience effectively. So that, obviously hurt me a lot, but I did the best with what I could and what I had and the time that I had, and everything that was available to me at the time. So I have no regrets about how I did it. I just wish it happened earlier for me. I wish I was able to start my racing career in my single-digit years. But that didn't happen, okay, so be it. I still made it. But, in answer to your question, I get long-winded, so forgive me. In answer to your question, Kyle Busch was and is a phenomenal driver. And that's on the NASCAR side. On the sports car side, I was astounded by the talent that Jordan Taylor has. When he and I were teammates at Auto House in the Auto House Camaro in GT racing, and we won at VIR, Virginia International Raceway, the guy blew me away. He was like Clark Kent, so mild-mannered, somebody you would never suspect that when you put a helmet on this guy, he's a whole different dude. And everything that he's doing and everything that he's gaining as far as success is concerned is no surprise to me. The guy is pure talent.
Well, you mentioned Kyle Busch, and I think it's been shown over the past few years that when it comes to driver development, he's somebody who can really help somebody, drivers that is. You look at people who've driven for his team in the truck series or are still driving from, like Christopher Bell, Noah Gragson, Todd Gilliland. All of them, in my opinion, will probably have good careers in NASCAR, and I think Kyle Busch has certainly had a major impact on them.
Yeah, no question. To be under the tutelage of Kyle Busch and some of the best equipment that's out there, don't forget that, is a win-win situation. I'll bet you that the wait list getting to KBM equipment is pretty much a mile long compared to any of the other truck teams.
Yeah. Now, this past weekend, the NASCAR Cup and Xfinity Series raced at Watkins Glen, and the Xfinity Series will be racing at Mid-Ohio and Road America this month, while the Truck Series is at Motorsport. As somebody from a road racing background, what is your opinion of NASCAR road racing?
Well, I think it adds a great level of excitement. I think it breaks up the typical scenario of the oval, and there's a lot of people that aren't all that bullish on the 1.5s because they're somewhat processional. I think this past weekend, with the finish that we had in the Cup race and such, was all the evidence that you need that road racing, Cup cars on a road course, on a proper road course, is good entertainment. What's going to happen on this roll in Charlotte? I think it's going to be a wreck fest, quite frankly. I think that they're trying to force something that, that configuration doesn't suit itself towards. But, I could be wrong, and as they say, that's why they run the race. If I could predict the future, I'd be rich, But, since I don't have a crystal ball or Ouija board, we'll just have to sit around like the rest of everybody else and, see how it plays out. But I think that the road courses add a great level of entertainment and excitement. I don't think the Sonoma race was all that exciting. And, I'm not sure why the Sonoma race doesn't lend itself well to really good racing on a road course. But I think it's been proven again, time and again, that it's really not that good. Maybe because it's just too technical, because it's too tight. And by those same reasons, that's why the Roval may not be well suited, because, the chicane that they tried to throw there on the backstretch is... I don't think it's going to work out very well. I think we're going to see some cars if they don't change that in the tires. And, they've already proven by taking out some tires that these cars may not be they may not be able to brake well enough to sustain what the load is on the brakes at a Roval like that. Because remember when, Darrell Wallace went into the tires? I remember when I think it was William Byron went into the tires, and other people have gone into the tires as well. And some of it's been maybe driver error, but I know on one occasion at least it was brake failure. And so that Roval, I don't think, lends itself very well to proper cooling of the brakes, not like a Watkins Glen does, which is very free-flowing and, opportunity to cool the brakes and such. Some of these real tiger courses, like a Roval, are going to be very difficult. And with all the turns that, Sonoma has, maybe that's the problem that it has as well. But, I don't know. I've never driven a Cup car, on Sonoma, so I can only speculate. But I think in general, a good purpose-built road course that has lots of, opportunity to cool the brakes and such, like a Road America, I think is good racing. I think that, when Xfinity comes to Road America, that's going to be a good thing. I'd love to see the Cup cars at Road America. Road America is my favorite road course, bar none, in this country, and I think that the Cup cars should go there.
Yeah, I think also, especially with the Xfinity and Truck Series road course races, I think something that I find really interesting about them is some of the one-off drivers who show up in those series, since usually they're in a different area from where the Cup Series is. You know, generally people from road racing backgrounds. I mean, it's like the Xfinity Series Road America race for later this month. I mean, like Connor Daly, who I really like from IndyCar, he's going to be in a Roush car. I saw the other day that Catherine Legg's going to be in both the Road America and Mid Ohio races. Also, Andy Lally, who's been in NASCAR at various points over the years, will be there. And I don't know if there's been any others. I'm sure there'll probably be some people that as you get closer to the race, it's like, oh, that person's in it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a few people that will surprise you, but I didn't hear about Connor Daly being involved. That should be interesting. I'll definitely have to keep an eye out for that. But yeah, you're right. There are some sports car drivers that pop up at the last minute, and typically with teams that probably aren't as well suited to road courses as they could be. But one of the things that I think is important for a driver's ability to adapt and their flexibility is to be able to go from a sports car to a stock car and see what they can do. Andy Lally loves it. I'm sure Catherine's going to enjoy the heck out of it. I have been trying to encourage Jordan Taylor to get behind the wheel of an Xfinity car since we were teammates, since 2011. And he's been working diligently to try to do it, but opportunities for a good car are very few and far in between. And he told me some of Jeff Gordon's influence to try to get him in good equipment, and it just hasn't been forthcoming. And he's smart enough to know that you can't carry a bad car. I don't care how good you are. If the car's not set up right and it's not engineered right and what have you, you're going to struggle, especially in a stock car. And so I think he's waiting for the right opportunity, but I'll be excited to see it when it comes together, because I think he could do a bang-up job in a stock car on a road course.
All right. Now, there have also been rumors of street circuits being added to NASCAR. What is your opinion of this?
I think the analogy's been utilized before, but it's kind of like trying to thread a metal shaving through two magnets. I think that stock cars on a street course is a recipe for disaster. It's been done before, I think. I think they did something like that in LA before. I remember there was a test down there or something like that in maybe preparation for a race. Maybe even had the race. I'm not convinced that they did. But I just don't think that it lends itself to enough runoff and ability to make clean passes without putting people on the fence. And the mentality and the adage of NASCAR is rubbing is racing. And when you rub like that, you got to have a little bit of an opportunity on a road course to make up for being a wheel off. And street courses really don't lend themselves that well to that. So I'm not a real big advocate for it, but if it's decided that they do it, I'll definitely tune in.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, at this point, it's just rumors. I mean, I don't know how seriously it's been considered, but you do bring up a good point that a lot of these street circuits, because of the nature of the location of where they're at and how they're designed, aren't very large. They're pretty narrow, in fact, and I think that would mean make the race not too exciting. And if anybody would really try to make passes that you would usually see in a stock car race, it probably wouldn't end that well for them.
Yeah, I think there'd be a huge use of the chrome horn, and without like a lot of runoff and area, that sort of stuff, I think it'd be very difficult. I mean, you saw all the missteps and things that happened at Watkins Glen this past weekend in the Cup Series, and that is okay at the Glen because there is ample runoff. The course is designed that way, but on a street circuit, there's not, and I can just see there being carnage. But um, we'll see. Like I said, if it happens, I'll be tuning in.
Yeah, right. Now, in an interview you did with CNN last year, you said you were, quote, not really embraced, especially at places like Talladega and Martinsville. If you're willing, perhaps you could elaborate on your experience.
Well, I think I was pretty clear on that. I was booed, and surprisingly so, because so many fans, thought I was good for the sport, and that I carried myself, conducted myself well, and there really wasn't any reason for me to be the quote unquote villain. And so it was surprising to me. Not everybody's gonna love you. I understand that, but to be booed, okay, why did I deserve to be booed? Did I do the Kyle Busch thing, quote unquote, and do this sort of thing, or whatever the case is. I never badmouthed the sport. I never badmouthed the spectators and fans. So I really was confused by why I supposedly deserved that sort of reception. So that's what I mean by I wasn't necessarily embraced. And I'm not saying that against or across all fans, because there are a lot of fans that were happy I was there. And I'm talking about fans I would have never thought in a million years would come up and approach me. Guys who, for lack of a better description, were about as redneck as you could possibly imagine. And they would wait for my autograph. And I was blown away by that. I was like, wow. That is really tremendous, heartwarming, and I didn't take it lightly. It's like these people really enjoyed the fact that I was there, and that was a big impression. But by the same token, when again, you're booed. Things happened in my career that I don't necessarily feel like going into in any depth. That made it very clear to me that I wasn't really welcomed by a pretty good faction of the fan base. And hey, I don't hold that against anybody in particular. I think a lot of that is cultural and how you're brought up, and what you're exposed to. And it's just unfortunate that there's so much divisiveness in this country as it is. But I'm not running for political office. I said what I wanted to say in the CNN interview, and I think I've capped it off pretty well right here.
Yeah, I'm sorry that when that happened, that at the time that you had to go through that, it was unfortunate. But yeah. I mean, it sounds like it was a small, maybe not a small minority, but it sounds like you had plenty of people who were behind you, were glad you were there, and I think that's something you should concentrate more on, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no question that that's the case. The good far outweighs the bad. So, that was just a point I made during that interview, and, it was in conjunction with that interview. And, I pretty much said all I want to say about it. My platform in racing was never about diversity. It was about being a race car driver who happened to be black, not a black race car driver. I said that when I first came into the sport. It's funny that Darrell Wallace has used that quote since I've been in there, and he probably feels the same way. He just wants to be accepted as a race car driver. That's why we do it. We're not up there to make any sort of socio-political statement. We just love what it is we do, and we want to do it with the best of the best. That's why we do it. That's why we strive for what we strive for, and we go through all the ups and downs. We go past and look past all the doubters and the naysayers and people that say you'll never make it. There's not people like you that are in this sport. What makes you think you can be successful? Just all the things that are just negative. And I just try not to focus in on that. But it is a reality. So, that's what comes, that's the story.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I would say you look at Darrell Wallace. I'd say he's probably one of NASCAR's more popular drivers this year. And now I'm sure he probably has his haters out there. It's unfortunate, but it's an unfortunate thing. But the fact is, he has plenty of people behind him, and I think that's what really counts.
Agreed.
Bill, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this. I really appreciate it. Thank you.